Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we're helping leaders live with integrity.
Whether you're a mom or a CEO, you're a leader, and how you lead matters. Well, welcome back to the Living Wholehearted podcast. I'm Jeff. This is my wife, Terra, and we are on lockdown in the Living Wholehearted podcast studio, and it is interesting to be in here. We know that you're on lockdown too. It's nationwide. It's a global situation right now. And we're hoping to bring some joy your direction. We're also hoping to bring some perspective and some tips that will help you navigate as an individual, a couple, a family, a business, an organizational leader, navigating these challenges that you're facing and that we're facing, and giving you a chance to overcome. So Terra, let's just start a little bit today in discussion about what we're hearing and observing, what we're experiencing that would be in common with a lot of other folks, but this idea out there as it relates to friendships, our kids, business and organizational leaders. What are we hearing? Teachers, what are we hearing? What are you noticing from the clinical hat that would be helpful to share today?
Well, before I go clinical, I kind of just want to start personally, actually. Can I start with how this came about for us? I mean, honestly, we were going to be starting a huge conference. Women were gathering, coming in from all over, and we were trying our best to really make sense of the data that was coming out in the news, but things were rolling out so rapidly and literally by hour. This is only a couple weeks ago. It feels like months ago.
It does.
But only just hour by hour, information was changing, and we had to reschedule the Encourage gathering. And so my initial shock of all of that, kind of the bargaining with God, I know that Encourage gathering was one of a bazillion things that people have had to cancel in the last few weeks, and things to come, from bridal showers to weddings, birthdays to surgeries to all kinds of significant moments. And just the loss of that. And I think there was just shock, to be honest, and the adrenaline. I just remember running on adrenaline from day to day. And then we moved into our business and the impact it would have on our business. And then right at the tail end of that, school, going to a halt. Yeah. And it was spring break for us. So in many ways, it felt kind of normal for our kids. But now we're in week 3 and trying to figure out a new normal, knowing that we're not going to be leaving our homes for a while. So for me, the emotional roller coaster has been extremely hard. And yet week 3 coming down to maybe a little more calm, a little bit more of a plateau. But the waves of grief and shock and sadness and anger, all these things that we process when we are hit with something out of the ordinary.
And something that impacts every part of our lives, and
every part.
Yeah, it's not like it's just one or two parts of our personal or business experience. And everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah, and I remember the last time this it feels similar to our 9/11 or mainly 9/11. I think it was the last time I really felt like such a community, a global impact. I know none of us, this is unprecedented times.
Yeah, in terms of the scale, scope,
yeah,
how many areas of life it touches. There's nothing that's been like this before, but that similar feeling of something just happened that was so out of our control. And it happened to, our country. This is happening to every country. And let's talk a little bit about the feeling of ambivalence. I think that sort of sets a tone for how you can have feelings on both sides. Why don't you define that ambivalence a little bit?
Yeah, it's a term that we use a lot in abuse recovery. It's that sense of being stuck between two. I can't decide whether this is good or bad. Those feelings of I love you and I hate you. It's just that confusing in between. And it's a lack of commitment one way or the other. So we use it in abuse because oftentimes offenders are people we trust. And so it's a common to those who have had a violation from someone that you love, and then out of nowhere, you get offended. So that is the similar feeling of we felt safe. We've been living in comfort, many of us, in a privileged country where we have access to grocery stores, just things that we can leave our home whenever we want, to feel like all of a sudden, boom, a place we have been where we felt trust, and then out of nowhere, we're hit with, now we can't leave our homes.
So you can have ambivalence in relationships, and that's what you were describing there. But you're also teetering into this ambivalence of environments, how we can have both positive and negative feelings about an experience that's happening all around us in our world. And there's people out there, I know that I've felt this and others have felt this. We've talked about this in a number of circles where it's like, I've got mixed feelings about this. People are saying I got mixed emotions, right? That's ambivalence. I feel happy for, a lot of people are saying that they are reporting that they have never spent time like this with their kids and they're in the last year or more, and that this is like a game changer for their relationship. That's happy. Happy that people who are married are getting a chance. Those that are reporting that this has been an amazing thing, that they're reading books together and
going for walks.
Yeah, we've been on a walk on our gravel driveway. It's a quarter mile long, and we're not social distancing with each other, husband and wives. But that was funny to get a text from our pastor's wife who's like, you two aren't social distancing with each other, are you?
Not at all.
Right. But
I do feel a little claustrophobic at times with you here all the time.
Yeah, I feel the same. But so those positives and things like around the dinner table and time, making meals together. This forced quarantine, there's some positives, but with that, at the same time, there's this pain and hurt about what's going on in the world around us. Those that are suffering, those that are physically dying, those that have lost loved ones from this thing. Let's talk a little bit more about some of how to hold both of these and how different people are in different places, and empathy. What's the place of empathy in this scenario as we interact online, over the phone, with other people, trying to discern where they are so that we know how we can not just project our stuff on them, but meet them where they're at too.
Great question, Jeff, because I think the truth is being able to say both, that it's normal to have both. And we're not going to resolve this for a while. There's still too many unknowns. And in a place of unknown, you've got to be able to live in ambivalence for a little while. I will say that part of the healing of living in the unknown is clinging to what we do know to be true. So trying to really go to, what do we know about God? Even remembering history, being able to recognize, what do we know are the facts here and now? Okay, I've got food in my freezer right now. Things like that really help calm that ambivalence to a manageable level. But when we're talking to one another and having empathy, to be able to hold both, to say, here's where I am at this hour. Right now, I'm feeling really sad because I just heard a story recently of a friend who just lost her grandfather. And so I'm grieving with her on that. And yet I also just was able to watch a movie with my kids in my pajamas. So that feels good. I haven't been able to do that for years. To be able to do both of those at the same time, I think having patience and understanding our different wirings too, and we can talk about that in a bit, Jeff, but even just how we're approaching this with our own wirings.
But you say that being two people that love the Lord, are followers of Jesus, and have been for a long time, that the church at large and Christians at large, this is an area that we all need to do some greater growing in terms of how to understand that a person who loves God, is a Christian, can be really upset about what's going on right now, or hurting, and you can be in a place where you're celebrating some things like the dinner table or what have you, right? That and it's not your job to go and make them feel or rise to the place that you are, because our faith and the Bible and quoting scriptures and verses that talk about be joyful always, or misuse. We got to really be living and speaking and staying in a place of humility and submission to the Holy Spirit, and recognizing that God gave us all these feelings. Someone might be in the exact opposite space you are, and they're no less a Christian because they are. And it's not your job to make them come to this high point that you might be feeling right now. In fact, it might be more your job to go to their space, to join them as an example of love and of sacrifice or empathy. That's something that Jesus might do too.
It might be something Jesus does. It is what he does. He joins us.
Am I getting a little preachy?
Well, maybe. I think you're also having great compassion for the polar opposites that we're sensing right now in crisis. People go to one side or the other. They either go to panic or they cling to the truths that we have from God's word, and yet sometimes that can come across as really trite sayings and missing people's humanity and the fact that this is a really hard time. And yet there are some pretty mighty, amazing things happening. And people are actually going to church online that wouldn't normally go to church because they have access to streamlining in a way, and they're desperate for some insight and some hope. And yet it's lonely. It's lonely for a lot of people, the singles, those that are elderly, that don't have access. There's just a lot of the both and.
Yeah, that aren't quarantined with family. I mean, they might be actually alone, literally.
Exactly. And so
I saw, I mean, when this was driving by a senior center, I saw literally a family outside the window doing the touch to their elderly one that was in that center right in our town. And it just gave me pause. It was early on, actually, in the COVID kind of takeover, and I just thought, "Wow, it's happening." And but you're right. It's there's these extremes, and
we go to extremes.
They kind of come in trauma. They come from fight, flight, or freeze, right? So they're connected there. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, there's this common response in trauma, and it's we talked about ambivalence, but there's another response that we start categorizing things as either good or bad. It becomes very clear, and there's a line, and it's a protector. We don't like to hang out in between, and so that response to be you're either trusting God or you're not, the all or nothing thinking. And so, I guess the empathy piece for us and for those that are listening as you're walking with your kids, your spouse, your friends, those you lead, is to recognize the both and to be able to maybe gently encourage people to embrace that, maybe if they're stuck on one side or the other, or just having compassion if they are on that side.
You can mirror and validate somebody, and even if you don't agree with their stance, it can help calm their brain just by mirroring and validating what they're saying. And even if it's extreme, it's actually loving to do that.
It is. But let me talk about some practical tips on how to actually calm our bodies, because when we started, I was talking about this roller coaster. I have felt like a roller coaster. There have been moments where I was petrified at night, and I think you, Jeff, actually was like, let's say out loud Psalm 23. And at first I'm like, I don't want to. But out of prayer, you were really just confessing out loud what you know to be true. And it brought comfort to me at that time.
Oh, I'm glad, honey.
And so that would be a really practical tip, is to actually say with our mouth out loud the knowns that we do know, even if our body doesn't believe it.
Yeah.
To move our mouth, to actually sing. That's where music is profound, to be able to actually use worship to say out loud. It helps calm the body, the amygdala that is in fight flight. We use things like just having a warm blanket or warm tea or a warm shower. Those kinds of things will help to calm and to tell your body you're okay for now. Worry and anxiety is fear of the unknown, and it's fear of what you can't control, and we can't control a lot right now. But what we can control is here in the moment. I can focus on what I can see with my eyes, what I can hear with my ears, what I can taste. I mean, even just like, stale coffee breath will ground me a little bit if I think about what do I taste? What do I smell? Sitting in my chair and actually thinking, I can feel my back up against the chair.
You're talking about the five senses here. God made us with these five senses, and when we're attuned to those, they ground us. and particularly are very helpful for grounding us through situations of chaos and of trauma, things where we feel like more than normal is out of control.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And honestly, it might not be that traumatic. It might be just because I'm overwhelmed with my kids being everywhere. I can't
Sure.
get a break. That's what I'm hearing from clients
Yeah.
who have a lot of younger kids.
Yes.
Where they aren't getting their normal self-care. They're not getting what they would typically get. And they're having to do the tag back and forth between two working parents with their kids home, and they don't have childcare, or it's overwhelming. And so it can be grounding just from something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be everything traumatic. It's the whole additive thing of our whole world changing. Literally, when we say our world, it means our lives, yours and mine, our lives, homework and play, our kids' lives, homework and play, is there's just so many factors that are changing that it's an additive. That's a different kind of trauma, actually. And so you're right, reminding ourselves of what is true. And, for us, the scriptural stance, the anchor points, and speaking these words reminds, even if you don't believe, I love that you said that because it's so true. There's so many times when we have to make our mouths say the things that we used to even believe or that we want to believe again. And I think that is a very special point in which God looks at us as his kids and says, I'm going to give you more faith right now.
Yeah.
You're demonstrating what little you have. I'm giving you more. And faith comes from him. We can't muster that up, but we can take steps to say and name. I love this too. I've heard about naming our fears and anxieties and the feelings that we have, actually saying what they are to God, telling them what they are, and doing that, giving them to him, casting our cares upon him, for he cares for us. That's actually practically how you do that. You name that, God, I'm afraid right now that I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm afraid right now that that my kids are going to get behind in school. And so on and so forth. Telling him that is the very thing that he's asking us to do in this time and in all times, but in this time particularly. He will ground us. He gives the faith that then supplies the peace that he says passes all understanding. That's the how. That's the how to do that.
And I would say if you've struggled with anxiety before, or that's a typical bent, and you've needed medication in the past, it actually might be time for you to get that now and to be able to do some telemedicine. That's the good news, is that we might not be able to go to the doctor as easily, but there are counselors in telemedicine that are on call and are able to help you. So I'm not saying go to medicine right away, but if that's typical for you, I would say this is not the time to go off. This is not the time to shame yourself because you need it. It's actually, there's grace. The temperature is really intense.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
But being able to use a lot of natural ways, again, tea does a lot of calming. I think thinking about us as parents, Jeff, and our kids, one of the questions I get from clients right now and even from friends is, how do we deal with all the disappointments that our kids are getting? I mean,
their world has been turned
I'm not going to get to go back to school and experience ...
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get to have my birthday party. I'm not, things that kids would be devastated by.
The markers that they've been looking forward to, especially older siblings, if they got to experience those things in the previous grades, and the younger ones are looking forward. That we have that in our family.
We totally do.
It's disappointing, and their whole world has been thrown upside down.
So using our typical empathy, but one of those things that you're saying and naming it is help them name it. Yeah. What are the things that they're going to miss about it? Don't dismiss it and be like, oh, it'll be okay, or we'll do something really great here in the house.
or use that classic phrase, at least, right? We know about that.
You got it good. There are a lot of people when we do the comparison game. So it's tempting to do that, but to be able to actually name the loss and maybe they draw a picture. If they're younger, they might want to draw a picture of all the things that they feel like they're going to miss or what it could have been like. Yeah. If they're older, they might write a letter. They can even write what I've asked older clients, teens and young adults, to write a psalm. King David is great at complaining. He does a great job of confessing the things that he's really frustrated about and disappointed. Mm-hmm. And it ends up leading him to this declaration of who God is and that he will trust his faithfulness and his goodness and his love, despite the fact that his enemies are coming after him. And so writing a psalm or a letter to God, however it makes sense to your kid.
And God's got broad shoulders. He can take all of that,
he sure
right?
Can.
Yeah, he can take that, and he does for the whole world, which is one reason why we worship him. No one else can do what he does. He can handle these emotions. He gave us them, right? And he calls them good. He doesn't shame us in our emotion. He gave us these emotions. It says, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say, so he's already recognizing that you have anger.
Exactly.
And that he's not saying don't have anger.
Yeah.
It's what you do with that, right? So I love that you're saying that for all the ages, there's a different application or a different way that they can communicate this, but that's loving. That's empathy as parents, that we can join in our kids' experiences. We don't just say, suck it up. Well, every generation's had what they had, and you should have had this happened to me in my day. No, I mean, we can turn towards, and that can accelerate the closeness that God wants us to experience as families, as couples, as with friendships and in relationships right now, right?
Yeah. And I think in our next episode, we'll talk more about practical ways to be able to walk alongside our kids and maybe actually utilize this time for building into our relationship, into our marriage, and with our kids. So not to add silver lining or to add this big bow, but to be able to say, here's maybe some things you can do. So stick with us for our next episode. But let's wrap this one up. Jeff, what's one principle that you just are really feeling like you want our listeners to remember at the end of the day when they're laying their head on their pillow and knowing that everything is a bit out of our control? What do you want them to remember?
We've been thinking about trust so much in the last couple of years even, and just God as a good father. And if you didn't have a good father, he is wanting our trust, just like those of us that are parents. And if you're not a parent, you can still conceptualize this. A good parent, a good father, a good mother wants their kids to trust them. And God is no different. It's just times a million, billion, unchangeable. He's looking for us to trust him. And that is so practical, actually, because we actually have to now, as it relates to many of us in our livelihoods, month to month, and everything that entails. And I just... as we confess and share our concerns and our fears with him, we are demonstrating our trust in him. We are asking him to help us to trust him more. And he's going to show up. This is who he is. He shows up, not in the ways in which we always want, and there's such a difference between wants and needs. He always meets needs, and he's looking out to meet those needs, and even in ways that we can't even understand. People who are suffering right now physically, he's still meeting needs. He's still working. He's still moving. We just may not even understand it right now. So trusting him and using our mouths to say, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust. I'm going to trust you. And I'm depending on you to honor your word and be who you say you are.
That's good. I think for me, maybe it's coming from being a mom. Maybe it's just me. But it's the end of the day, I have to just lower my standards, lower my expectations, and expand my timelines. The mantra that our friend Kathy Morrissey really shared with me the moment I became a parent.
That was what her dad had shared with her.
Yeah, and that just keeps coming to mind because even as I listen to the homeschooling expectations or the normal work demands that we have on our life, or even all of these wonderful ideas that are coming out about using this time for our families, it just can get overwhelming in a different way, different expectations. And again, just recognizing that we don't know what's coming tomorrow, but today I can trust God, as you're saying, with what he gave me today. And so I heard someone talk about quarantine blessings. And so as I'm lowering my expectations and expanding my timelines, I really, at the end of the day, am trying to think, okay, today, what were my quarantine blessings? And what was one or two things that I noticed that was good, that was really good? So
I want to just say one last thing. I did this a couple days ago working on, we mentioned music, and I for my whole life needed music, and particularly songs that were tied to my faith to remind me of what was true, even when I was struggling to believe it. And a couple days ago, I spent some time right here in the studio recording 10 songs that artists wrote lyrics and melodies to, and you can find their original work everywhere. I just, in the heartbeat of wanting to provide a booster to faith hope and love, made these recordings, sang these things, and they're nothing fancy. It's just me, my guitar, and laptop. But I made them available and put them on one of our sites. It's a Patreon site through Courageous Girls.
We'll put it in the bio.
Yeah, it'll be in the bio. But if you go to mycourageousgirls.com, click on the support button. You don't have to support anything here, but it will take you to these songs that are free and downloadable. There's 10 of them, and I hope that they can encourage and bless you, increase your faith, hope, and love.
Thank you for joining us in being a leader committed to shrinking the integrity gap between the values we espouse and the values we actually live out in practice.